So to me, it doesn't make sense to call something alternative energy if it's coming from the sun, because where else are you going to get energy from?
Renewable energy is derived from a renewable resource, typically an alternative to fossil fuels, and does not harm the environment. Fossil fuels currently provide more than 85% of all the energy consumed in the United States, nearly 2/3 of our electricity, and virtually all of our transportation fuels.
A lot of the grid is powered by natural gas in California, and right now, due to new drilling methods, we've got kind of a supply glut for a few years. But natural gas has its own peak issues too, and it's looking like it may well not be as abundant or nearly as cheap within 5 years or a decade. And no one can tell the future for sure. But the thing is, these questions that used to look like, oh, it'll happen in 100 years, we don't have to worry about that. Now, every agency and their brother, even the most skeptical ones, are saying by 2017, 2020, we've got real issues.
The energy an average U.S. home uses each day is equal to the combined energy of 108 one-ton vehicles moving at 100 miles per hour.
And now it's almost as if it could possibly be too late. You know, we're engaging in what I consider to be triage at this point, because the inevitable effects of global warming are going to be upon us within this century, and they may not occur in our lifetime. They might not occur, within the short-sighted scope of our greed and fear that occurs, within the next week as to, what my immediate desires are. But if we think long-term, then there are drastic consequences for our children, for our grandchildren, and for the health of the planet as a whole if we don't adopt these.
Our culture's driving narrative about renewable energy is that the transition away from fossil fuels must take place on a large scale. This message takes power away from individuals and puts it in the hands of governments and corporations. Not only is small-scale fossil fuel independence possible, it's critical. It's time for us to stop being spectators and to start being empowered changemakers by adopting solutions for a sustainable planet.
It's really, really vital to look at this in a sequence of 3 questions. First is conservation. First, you have to reduce the amount of power you use. Look at your lifestyle and see where, am I leaving the light switch on too often? Things like that are an important first step to look at. Second, look at efficiency. The electricity and the energy that you do need to use. Try and see if you can upgrade some efficiency things about your home to make it more optimal, how you do use it. Look at weather stripping, maybe a more efficient furnace, more efficient room heater, those types of things. And then, and only then, does it become economically feasible to look at renewables.
Replacing fossil fuel is not the only way that personal renewable energy systems help people reduce their energy impact.
Absolutely. I'm much more conscious of energy consumption. And it's kind of fun. I mean, I appreciate that. It's sort of like having a garden and being more aware of what you eat.
You can have just as great of a lifestyle. What's even more exciting is that you can even have better.
Namely, it means you're not affected by blackouts on the grid or rising energy prices, and you have the satisfaction that comes with self-sufficiency.
This is a little extreme because we're totally off the grid, but for the average person it would be ideal to be supplementing the grid with your own power. Be much easier, no generator, no batteries, no big deal.
A microgrid is a decentralized energy system separate from the national grid that distributes to many small recipients within a community.
If we look at off-grid in relation to microgrid, well, in terms of economy of scale, it makes sense to do things, together on a larger scale and team up with your neighbors and maybe start doing things on a neighborhood basis. It might be that you've got, I don't have great sun access on my roof, for example, and my neighbor might over here, or maybe he doesn't either, but just down the street from us, there's a field that's in our neighborhood that has great solar resource. So why not team up together and pool our resources and go in together and create a microgrid?
So a lot of the microgrids actually exist out of necessity. So how do I feel about them? I think that they serve the clients very well. There's entire, they call them islands, groups of people that don't have a utility provider except maybe hundreds of miles away. And so this is their only option. So when you look at being off the grid and microgrids, it's not, a lot of times in our world, it's not so much by choice, it's out of necessity.
We have a large proportion of people in Nevada County that are off-grid. As a result of that, California has 2/3 of the nation's installed solar, but Nevada County within California has the highest solar density per household.
If you look at the question of oil supplies peaking in the near future, and if you combine that with the question of it takes a lot of fossil fuels and diesel inputs to 1, make windmills, 2, make solar panels, 3, install them, transport them to the site and install them. All of that, getting them online is a very fossil fuel intensive process. And if we're looking at fossil fuels peaking and becoming ridiculously expensive in the near future, maybe one thought is let's get as many renewables onto the grid, both at utility scale and at home scale, as smartly as we can. Let's get them onto the grid now while we still can.
Very straightforward. Whether your motivations for going with a renewable resource is because of financially based, meaning the cost of power is going up, astronomically and you can't afford it, and you're trying to fix and hedge your cost of electricity over time, or whether or not you're trying to save the planet because of all the pollutants that are being pumped in the air. The time is now. It's past midnight. What I really hope to see in our culture and on the world stage is education of the public, so that they can understand this rocket science, this confusing DC to AC strings. I don't understand this electrical jargon, to something where they say, I've got my power from my roof and it's serving me very well.